but happy Wednesday, everybody. My name's Aaron. I'm the co-founder, managing director here at BWG Connect. We're a giant networking knowledge sharing group. I kicked this off 7.5 years ago, just out of that need to connect with other brands and do some networking and knowledge sharing as a whole. I spend the majority of my time talking to brands. I try to hit 20 to 30 a week. And just asking them, hey, what are the biggest things you're trying to solve for? What are the biggest pain points? And then also, hey, who's helping you solve those? And so if anybody'd like to have a follow-up conversation, would love to spend some time with you as well. We don't sell anything here at BWG Connect. It's just networking. I'd love to sit down and say, hey, what are the topics for upcoming calls and who's helping you solve it? And if you need help with partner selection or anything like that, more than happy to do that as well. If you just need a recap of what's been going on across the industry in Q4 here, more than happy to do that. So today, we're going to get into, I'd say, what's one of the top things that's been popping up, which is profitability as a whole. The profit, you probably see it right here as the slide pops up, One Piece survival guide. I mean, profitability is the driver behind almost every conversation I have right now, whether it's on the Amazon side, the Walmart side, direct to consumer, paid media, retail media, whatever it is. And so we got some great friends, partners, supporters of the network over at Channel Engine that are here. And they brought on a friend as well. And Greg's here and from AMZ PhD. And they're here to not only educate, but answer as many questions as possible. And I say that because in real time, we want to capture as many questions as you have and get those answered. So if you do have them, feel free to drop them in the chat or drop them into the Q&A, and we will get those answered as soon as possible. We'll blend them in. So as you go through the deck, if you have a question, just drop them in one of those two places and we'll get them answered. But that, before we kick it off, Jordi, I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do a little bit of background on yourself and Channel Engine, that'd be great. And then you can kick it to Bobby and Greg, and then we'll get into the deck. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. Welcome everybody. Thanks for having us. Channel Engine, small kick background is around, we've been around for around 11 years, mostly in the 3P or marketplaces industry. And earlier this year, we acquired a company, RDP, where Bobby was the CEO of. That's brought us all together. And Channel Engine's endeavored to expand further into the 1P, particularly Amazon vendor side of things. A lot of our clients are doing both, and a lot of learnings came from that, and particularly with acquiring a company that Bobby created, really drove that to the next level. So that's also why we'd like to focus on that. And we're giving away some of the conclusions around the profitability already, but that's going to be all for today. I'm myself VP Revenue here in North America for Channel Engine, responsibly commercially for the company in this part of the ocean. And I'll kick it over to Bobby.
Thanks, Jordi. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining. I'm Bobby Peloquin. As Jordi mentioned, I was the CEO of Retail Data Partners. We had developed the first 1P vendor central tools in the marketplace many years ago. Then we were acquired by Channel Engine back in May. So I've been here on the strategic client success team for about 7 months. Prior to that, I spent 11 years at Nielsen. So I've been in the e-commerce and the advertising space ever since way back in the email marketing days. I started my career, and yeah, looking forward to talking about 1P vendor central. Greg, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, this is Greg Alexandrian, CEO and president of AMZ PhD. We are your Amazon doctors. So basically, we're an Amazon agency that help you sell on Amazon and to Amazon. So both 3P and 1P. Been working with Amazon for coming up on about 20 years now. So know a little bit about Amazon.
Awesome.
Happy Wednesday.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into a quick reminder. If you have questions as we go, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll get them answered real time. But yeah, Jordi, I'll kind of kick it over to you if you want to kind of walk through here, and we'll just jump into a conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, I'll start with the most boring slide of all, at least how I say it. It's just like a bit of a background of our company, and then I promise we're gonna go talk about fun topics like profitability. Just a quick background. Yeah, we've been around. We have a ton of channels, like 950 global channels, and now doing a lot of 1P and 3P or hybrid selling. And that those global learnings really gave us an edge to mid to larger size companies that are looking to expand, but don't always know where to expand to or how to expand. And we're working with a lot of partners. Actually, Greg, funny enough, both is a partner and a client. So that is something to take into consideration. And yeah, we have a large network that we facilitate. And I think, yeah, that's also just further into the topics that we're going to explore today: profitability and the challenges on the 1P selling, building a strong P&L on the vendor negotiation. So I think vendor negotiations are coming up. So we asked Greg, like, hey, give us a cheat sheet or everything that you should prepare to. So that we're going to dive into. Also the hybrid models. So like when and why should you and how should you potentially evaluate if you want to supplement 3P next to your 1P, and what kind of strategies would evolve around improving that profitability. So those are some of the topics today. And I think we're going to also touch a little bit on recovery management if we have time, because that's a powerful way to get money back for free. So yeah, that's something we're gonna dive into. And yeah, to start off with, if this works, we want to do a quick poll. So I'm gonna ask Aaron to activate it in the chat, or we haven't done this in this platform, but just to see a little bit what the audience is doing and engage with everyone. So are you able to activate this poll, or Aaron, tell people how to?
I'm gonna activate it right now. Amazon 1P challenges launch.
All right.
So if you give a chance, everybody, feel free to jump in there and answer, and we'll just tabulate them as they go. And as they're doing this, I just want to have just the thought, just food for thought for people. And one of the biggest conversations that I'm having right now when we talk about profitability when it comes to Amazon is around this idea of, hey, should I be 1P? Is it more profitable? Should I be 3P? Is it more profitable? And that's one of the things that the biggest thing I think we're going to get in today is it a hybrid model? What's right for me? What's not? This could include like SVS, and should I do all those different things? And so I'm super excited as people are filling out this poll here. But that is one of the key things, just Jordi, as you were talking, that I wanted to make sure that we highlighted is there's a lot of those questions that come in. Which side of the Amazon marketplace should I be on? So I'll give this about, I don't know, 5 more seconds here, and it'll go for a full minute. And then I'm going to end the poll. If you got an answer in there, I'll just end the poll right now. And then we'll share the results.
There you go. So we did this in another webinar, a few weeks ago, and it was pretty much the same results. That predominantly the squeeze of margins is one of the most important pieces or elements, and then also the secondary, the lower orders or reduced visibility is also one of the most common things. We had a bit more account closures there, so that's something that happened a while ago. We'll dive into it, but like they did a mass termination of smaller vendors seller accounts. So yeah, that's maybe good thing.
And I see that Roman has another thing too. The challenge is listings suppressed due to profitability considerations by Amazon. So that'd be another one to add in.
That's a good addition. So yeah, we'll dive into that one as well.
Yeah, we'll update that for the next one for sure. Yeah,
I like it. Thanks, Roman. So yeah, let's dive into the vendor negotiations. I think this is the thing I'm most excited about because it's something that we hear a lot of questions about. So I'm going to punt it over to Greg to dive a little bit on what are your recommendations, advice, etc. When it comes to the vendor negotiations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that Amazon and your vendor manager is looking at the most is the net PPM. If you don't know what that is, it's the net pure profit margin. So that includes all your co-op and things like that in it. And so when you're negotiating, and first of all, you want to make sure that you're ahead of time, you're making sure that you're in a good place with your net PPM. Depending on the category, it might be anywhere from 40 to 50%. But if you're down into the 30s or somewhere around there, you're going to sort of be in trouble. So some things you can do to boost your net PPM ahead of time is accepting more bulk orders, because with those bulk orders, Amazon's getting more margin, helps them sell through at a better price. And then along with that is also participating in deals. Same thing, the deals, the nice thing about that too is with Amazon, getting more people at your product detail pages, even if someone doesn't buy during a deal, you still get credit for it. It helps with the algorithm, and you become more of a solid citizen. It helps you, rise in the ranks in terms of your bestseller ranking and things like that. And then a trick that I use all the time is advertising high net PPM ASINs. So what we do is we'll identify over the last, say, month or two, what ASINs in the catalog have actually been, providing a really nice high net PPM for Amazon, and advertise those, go after those. And the nice thing too is the advertising algorithm sort of likes those as well, right? Because it makes sense, because they want to advertise things that Amazon is making money with. So what that does is just helps you push through a lot more of the high net PPM. So overall, if you have some stragglers that aren't doing so well, if you have more of the high net PPM SKUs selling, it's going to blend, and overall your net PPM will be more healthy.
So this is like leading up to it, right? This is something
Yep.
active that you're doing.
Yeah.
So when you're going in there.
Yeah. So it's not to do like a week before you're negotiating. This is something you want to consider the entire year, doing some of these things, so that by the end of the year, your net PPM is good. And you do want to check to see, hey, where are you at right now? Where are you at compared to last year? Because those are the things that they're going to be looking at for sure. And I'm sure all of you that have talked to your vendor manager, they've probably mentioned net PPM at some point too. And you do want to also, in the next section there, benchmark against your peers for various different things. The co-op, the freight allowance, and damage allowance, those are always pain points. Those are always the ones that they come at you. Hey, now it's the new year, we have to renegotiate the terms, and they're always looking to raise everything, of course. And then, so in some cases, your co-op might be right in line with what other peers are. And so a good way to know that is, if you're dealing with an agency, they should have a decent idea of where everyone else is in that neighborhood.
I mean, that kind of answers Dan's question that comes in here. Where can you find co-op allowance benchmarks from similar brands? You're either talking to them or you're asking your agency.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Amazon will tell you what the benchmarks are too, but it's always good for you to sort of know ahead of time before you're talking to your vendor manager to get an idea, are you looking good or are you looking bad? In other words, let's say co-op, let's say you're at 5% and Amazon comes in and says they want to be at 10%. That's going to be a big shock to you, but that 10% is probably not going to be such an unreasonable number compared to everyone else. So that's more just to be prepared, is what that benchmark section is.
Yeah, I see Dan hops in here, and I don't trust anything Amazon tells me.
Well,
that's why, strategically, it's right. Ask your vendor manager, but take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk to other people and other brands, and if you need connections, as well, like then we can find a time to chat. But Greg, just while we're on this, that I want to go back to Romans just a little bit, because listings suppressed due to profitability considerations. Like, is that something that's getting addressed in those how to boost your net PPM? And that's a whole separate webinar. Like we can punt that, or just have a separate follow-up as well.
Well, it could be separate, but just along those lines, though, obviously what Amazon's saying is, hey, when they go out and check to see what they should be selling it at compared to other brands of similar product, they're having to sell it at this price. And because of that, if your cost to them is too low or they're not making enough margin, they're going to suppress it. So some of the things you can do with that is, help them by either doing a price cut or, asking your vendor manager, hey, can we do a deal on that? Whether it's going to be a deal a day, a best deal, a lightning deal, anything that'll sort of help their margin. Because what you don't want to do is have that item sort of cut off completely. But what we can do is circle back to this when we talk about the 3P side of it too, because there's something you can do with that there as well.
Awesome. All right.
So I'll sort of punt that just a little bit here in a second. And then, as far as the SVS, is that worth it? Right. It's like, if you guys don't know what an SVS is, basically a person that's just for you, although you're usually shared with another vendor, if not, two other vendors, and they're supposed to give you special access. They're supposed to be very strategic, actually, is what it stands for. I personally haven't found much strategy with them. But what it is good for is let's say if you're not working with an agency, you just have an internal person that knows Vendor Central as much as they possibly can, which is not going to be a ton. The SVS can kind of get stuff done for you. But with it being typically 2% of invoice, it's a big hit. And that's only for larger vendors. Because if you're doing, a couple $1 million a year, you're not going to be able to get an SVS for 2%. So, oftentimes that's an investment of $200, $250, $300,000. I think it's not worth it, but it's just something to mention. But along those lines, the reason why I mentioned SVS too, because I have, for example, a client that has an SVS and they want to get rid of the SVS because they have indeed found that there was no value there. Surprise, surprise. And so there's other things that you can do to help your vendor manager, but that also helps you. So that's the section in the quid pro quo. So, there's launch opportunities as an example. So while you're negotiating, one of the things that might be good for you is you've got other brands you want to launch. And in the past, Amazon hasn't wanted to launch those brands for whatever reason. And this is a way to negotiate it at the time. So now all of a sudden it's a win-win for you because you get your other brands in there and more revenue, and Amazon sort of gets what they want because you give them something, whether it be on the co-op or whatnot.
Greg, do you feel on the SVS, I think you're talking about the same client that we share who's not happy.
Yes.
So I've been getting this question a lot, and I've asked for feedback, and pretty much everybody has not been happy, but it does seem it depends on the manager. I think that one client was originally happy, then they switched, and it was just a nightmare. I mean, the Amazon guy ended up responding saying you're not being professional because they just wanted a response. But do you find everybody I've spoken to, for the most part, says it's not worth it, but do you find maybe it depends on the manager and who you get?
Yeah, it certainly could depend on the manager and who you get. The only problem with that, though, is everyone's a baby these days, meaning that, your SVS isn't like someone who's been with Amazon for 10 years. They've probably been there for, 10 weeks, not even 10 months, and so that's part of the problem. Because I've experienced that in particular. All of a sudden, we get a new person on the SVS side, and how long have you been with Amazon? Oh, I've been with Amazon for 2 weeks. Oh, you're going to be a lot of help because I can tell you just from even years ago, vendor managers would tell me, look, it probably takes a year just to understand Amazon's internal system as a vendor manager. So if you've been there for 2 weeks, 2 months, there's not a lot they're going to get done.
So, I think so. Also, Daniel just shared a similar experience that they were happy with the SVS, and then they had something good, and then someone bad, and now someone good. So it's like it goes, and the turnover at Amazon is quite significant, of course. So that's why it also depends on the person. Similar with the vendor manager in our experience, that also sometimes the vendor manager is a lot more open for you to explore different venues like 3P, and sometimes they're very strict and they're against it. We'll dive into that in a sec. I did have a question from Ian. We realized that not these questions are not publicly available, so I'm going to read it out. What are the best services to utilize from SVS? And I thought that was a good question as well.
Yeah, and some of the ones that are really good, depending on your catalog and product, having the proper setup for the parent and child relationship is very important. A lot of times things get listed on Amazon and the children are separated and not in the same parent. It's very important to have that, and that's something that SVS can help with internally. Another thing that they're good for is creating deals, that sort of thing. Those are probably the two main subjects I would use them for. They will give you sort of a catalog health report as well, and then they can kind of help explain some of that and help you fix some of those things, like having A+ content and all your bullet points and et cetera, right number of images. So
nice. Yeah, and Daniel added as well that they were big enough to get the bad person removed. And I think his point was resolving product blocks and other compliance issues was one of their key things that the SVS helped with.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. And then back to the quid pro quo section, just to talk about that for a second. When you are negotiating with your vendor manager, look for something like, if they're just asking for co-op, right? Great. That's great for them. It does nothing for you. There's nothing that you get back. So I like to go after things like, incremental marketing spend or, something like that. So there's also incremental co-op opportunities where you're part of the brand farm, the logo farm, or on the landing page for the particular product category that you're in, that sort of thing, because at least then you're getting something. It's some quid pro quo there. It helps them because you're giving them, let's say, 2% for incremental marketing spend, but then it helps you because it helps, serve the brand and have it out there and to move through more product. So, I hate it when all they want is just the co-op. Oh, great. Yeah. You want just more points from me. Great. What are you going to give back to me? So that's why those other things are really important, I think. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to push back. There's someone on here, at least I know he's supposed to be on here. I can't tell if I see him, but that knows very well that we push back with Amazon. I mean, we've gone to bat, like just push to the point where they're almost like, I give up. Don't be afraid to do that. They'll try to tell you, oh, we're going to shut you down. We're not going to give you POs. Never saw it.
So really another quick thing that just, my previous time having a pretty big 1P business on Amazon, Dan, I totally align with you. Like it is good one, bad one, good one, bad one. And if you're big enough, that's something. If you're smaller and you're trying to assess the SVS side, you may not be able to request to get somebody removed. But if you're big enough, you can, and then you can make sure you're getting the cream of the crop. The other thing, though, is just in these AVNs, this idea of just not answering for a while and seeing how many other people, right? Because as the vendor manager has a number that they have to hit, is it a strategy to, pushing back, but also just not answering for a while? Is that a
Well, I mean, I don't know about the not answering for a while, but I get what you're saying too, right? Because that happens in the brick and mortar space too, where these buyers they have to make their margins at the end of the quarter or the end of the year or whatever it is, and they have their hand out to everyone else. And if you're the last one, they've already made it up with everyone else, so you're in better shape. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say not answering, but more of maybe stalling, just saying, look, we're that way you're getting back to them saying, hey, we're acknowledging that we got this from you. We're not prepared to talk about this yet. We've got this or that going on. At least you can delay it. And to your point, Aaron, which is a great point, because that does happen. They've already sort of, got what they needed from everyone else. And now maybe you're in a better position to not have to give up as much. Love that.
awesome.
Nice. On that note, thanks, Greg, for a pretty extensive contribution on the negotiations.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Before we dive into the profitability piece, which is maybe the most exciting, we're gonna dive a little bit into the hybrid models. It's something that we see as a trend more and more. And Aaron, this is also I think the cue to activate. Thank you. The next question, just from the audience, trying to understand how much of you all are doing 1P, 3P, or hybrid, or none. That gives us a bit of a more clear idea of what type of audience is in the room and how to speak to it. So please answer that question. It should be popping up on your screen, so it's pretty easy to answer.
Yeah. We'll give it another like 25, 30 seconds. While people are answering, I've just seen this huge push to a hybrid model. When Amazon will allow you to, I have the other side. If you're large enough, you try to go, and Amazon's like, no way, like forget about it.
Yeah, it's funny. We also have clients where that was the case, but then they were actually large enough to tell Amazon, no, we're gonna do it anyway. So it's also it's also like the who's bigger. But yeah, there's if you're really a beast, then but it also has to do with those with the profits, right? And I think that's an interesting part, that if the net PPM doesn't make sense for Amazon, they are also motivated to somehow get better profits from you. And sometimes on the 3P side, it is better. So the majority of this room is on 1P only, 52%. Only a few do 3P, and 45% do hybrid. So I think that's an interesting statistic. Maybe it's then good to understand from 2022 to 2023, we saw a huge shift going. So where it was first 53% that was only doing 1P, that was doing hybrid, then it went to 74% that was doing hybrid. And that's also what we're seeing. A lot of companies in the past 2-3 years came to us and they're like, hey, we want to do a little bit 3P. We want to test around with it. We want to play around with it. Some of them did it through a distributor, or they created a new subsidiary or brand. And some of them are just head to head, and they had a good vendor manager that allowed them to do it. But yeah, we're seeing a tremendous opportunity at least, or shift, and this is for brands selling on or into Amazon, that that was a big jump. So that's maybe good to understand. This might be a bit obvious, but it's also why. So we've seen and we've talked a lot with these companies of what's happening. Why do companies really like to also add the 3P next to the 1P? And a hybrid, as you can see on the screen, it just overall 3P gives you a lot more control, but also more responsibility. And it's a little bit less or a little bit more risky, right? Because you don't get the bulk orders, and you do have the risk of unsold inventory, etc. But ultimately, if you play it well, certain products, and that's like the conclusion a little bit, certain products fit really well for 1P. You should continue to absolutely do that. And certain products are just better to go 3P. And that it all comes down to profit. And where is the profit? But it helps you to also cope with some of the trends in the market. So I wanted to dive through a couple of things that happened. But one of the biggest reasons companies at least come to us and say, hey, I want to also add my 3P, is that flexibility, is to decrease the dependency on Amazon 1P. And that if Amazon does like a big change and say like, oh, we're certainly going to do this, then they have an infrastructure to be like, well, okay, then we're just going to go 3P. Some of them even dare to use it in their negotiations. But yeah, that's part of it. Sorry, Greg, you had an addition.
Yeah. Looks like there's a question here. How are you able to control price in a hybrid model? So the only place you can control the prices, of course, is in the 3P side. And that's the part of the hybrid model that you have control over. Amazon has full control over their price on the 1P model. Unless, of course, you're really ginormous and you can tell them this is where you have to be, but that's going to be pretty unusual. So that's just, if you have a product that you find that you're really having a problem with, you could shift it over to the 3P side.
It's part of that reason, right? If you are not hitting your profitability goals because Amazon is squeezing and setting like certain prices, that is also part of that migration and moving to 3P to make sure you can set your own prices.
Yeah, and one thing along those lines too, I just popped in my head too, is that I've noticed that Amazon will sometimes price against not someone else selling your exact same product and not someone else selling your exact same product on another platform, although that's what they of course do. They will, the image, if there's someone who has like a product that looks like yours, but it's actually a completely different brand and it's selling for less, they will oftentimes price match against that. And by the way, that's something that the SVS can help you out with to try to block. And that's where having in 3P, you can have a little more control over that because you're not going up against, this XYZ company. It's not your brand, it's not your product. So there's no reason to price match against that.
Yeah, and actually, Daniel just shared a story around that. He said for a while they were price matching random eBay sellers.
Yeah.
Luckily, that stopped, and most probably because you had that SVS, right? So that is something that.
Yeah, Daniel, were those was it your brand that someone was selling on eBay, or just a product that looked like yours that was being sold on eBay? Curious.
Our brand. It was their brand.
Well, they will price match that. I mean, if it is your brand and it's off of Amazon anywhere, it could be your own website, it could be someone else's website, they will price match against those. So it's important to sort of make sure to police your sales channel as well, to make sure that you're not getting gray market goods out there, etc. Expiring products. Got it.
No.
Yeah. I could see how that
could tough.
Have problems.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, and maybe diving into some of those trends that we've seen, and they're pretty abrupt. I think the latest one was that Amazon did a mass termination of small vendor accounts. So I think anything under 5 million or under 10 million, like 90% of them, they just terminated. Yeah. Which they terminated a month and a half, 2 months before the peak season. So that was, we had a lot of them come to us like, hey, what do we do? Can we quickly launch the 3P? But those things are, of course, you're depending on a very large organization, and they just do whatever is in their best interest, not necessarily in your best interest. So that was
with no notice on top of it.
With no notice or very little notice period. Within Europe, same thing happened with they decided to stop working with any distributor. So there's like only the brand directly we can do on the Amazon vendor side of things. So that was, yeah, that was also pretty.
That's a positive, I think. I mean, at least for the brands. So that's great.
Yeah, for predominantly the brands, it's a positive. But it's of course, some of those distributors were very dedicated distributors. They were doing the entire supply chain. They had all the inventory shipped directly from China or from wherever it was created. I think it's an opportunity for brands, but those kind of decisions Amazon makes, it's pretty challenging that suddenly you're in the midst of it and you have to kind of like have that flexible infrastructure to be able to cope with it. Yeah, similar, there's a couple of other things, but like, AI has been getting a lot of attention, and I think it's important to one of our other agencies. They also saw like a lot of things happen around AI. So it's like, yeah, I think there's a lot that you have to be aware of to not get too distracted with it. I think that was our main recommendation.
Yeah, can you repeat that range? As Ian dropped, what range is considered a small vendor account?
Yeah, I believe it was like under 5 million, but we've even like annual revenue. That was like a smaller account. But it's not to say that all of them are deprecated. It's
Yeah.
just we've seen like a ton of them. But we still have accounts that do
We
1
have
or
several,
2,
yeah.
3 millions, and they are still there. But yeah, this mass termination, we can send the article, but it was like suddenly a ton were just switched off. I personally think they'd look at the net PPM and say like, okay, which ones do we earn enough money from,
Right.
and are worth it to continue to have that direct relationship, and the rest we're just gonna kind of kick off. So yeah,
Good
and
point,
and they
Jordi.
did
That
it.
probably was a big part of it. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have several that are under that. And I think a few years ago, Jordi, it was more in Europe, the distributors, right? There was two
Yeah, well,
amounts.
they announced
That
it.
was
I think it
most.
was January last year. They did pre-announce that pretty far in advance. But we had a few big distributors that were just suddenly like, what to do.
Yeah.
So, in a similar vein, also on the seller model, on the 3P side, a lot of things happened. So there was also a decent amount of trends. For instance, they are gonna deprecate a feed integration. So the flat files is something that from April next year is gonna be disappearing. So on the seller model, you have a lot more responsibility on making sure that you have a proper integration, especially with orders and inventory shipments, controlling pricing, content. There's a lot more you have to do. And there are some opportunities. So you're also seeing some vendor tooling is starting to become available for sellers. There's like things around Amazon MCF where you can reuse FBA stock levels for other channels. Now, of course, Walmart launched the same program, and actually Zalando in Europe and a few others are now looking into doing the same program. You have Amazon AWD, which is kind of like their Amazon warehousing and distributing. So it's kind of like the distributing piece before it hits to the FBA warehouses. A funny one was Amazon Today, where they launched it. They approached us, can you please build it? So we are actually planned to build it, which means it's like they pick it up at the store and deliver it immediately to the end consumer same day, which was like a pretty insane program with good uplifts. And then they actually deprecated that also. So from January, it's not going to be available anymore. So I'm happy we didn't build it, but it's like these kind of rapid changes means like you have to be on your toes. That's like the long story short here. You have to be on your toes with both vendor and seller because a lot of things happen, and some of them are opportunities and some of them are threats. Still to this day, or at least Q2 2024, I don't think we have the Q3 results yet, but 61% of all the units sold on the third-party marketplace, right? So it's still currently the most units are being sold on the third-party side of things. Then diving a little bit into profitability, and so it's good to understand there's different seller models. I'm not going to go through this whole model right now. We can share this after, but it is important. The long story short, it's important to calculate what is the best model for your products, for your categories. And it's important to make sure that you take the different elements into full consideration, not just the cost of goods minus margin, but also their seller expenses, and then ultimately knowing what's the profit that you get out of there. So I think that's an important thing to take into consideration. And with that, we're going to dive into what are some of the strategies to improving that profitability. We're going to go over to Greg again, and then I'm going to let Bobby wrap it up.
Okay, so one of the things is the Vine program, if y'all are familiar with that, it's where you can actually offer free goods to Vine reviewers to review your products. The funny thing is on Vendor Central, if you want to do it, it costs you $1,500 per parent ASIN, but on Seller Central, it's only $200. And is it the same service? It's 100% the same service. There's no difference between it at all. So that's where, if you have the hybrid model, if you want to do a Vine program on a new product, launch it in Seller Central, do your Vine there, and then you can let that inventory go away so that Amazon can then buy it on 1P if you so choose. But it's just one of those little things that if you don't know about it, it's good to know. So that can save you a lot of money on the Vine side of it. Also, if you haven't heard of the Born to Run program, it's basically where you're offering a purchase order yourself. Basically, you're saying, hey, I want to sell these to you. Will you take them? And they decide whether they will or not. There is something that happens with that where you either will agree to returns after 90 days if they don't sell through, or a 25% discount. But ultimately, it's great when you have an item that you've had no orders from Vendor Central. Amazon doesn't have any in stock. This is something you already had listed on 1P, and they're not repurchasing it. You can use Born to Run to list it, to do that. And then if it doesn't work, if they're rejecting it, then you list it on Seller Central. So it's a great way to use Seller Central for items that maybe Amazon did sell at one point, but for now, for whatever reason, they're not ordering it because maybe they're comparing it to another product which isn't even yours, and they think it's unprofitable. It listed on Seller Central so you can continue selling it. And at some point, it may even trigger Vendor Central to purchase it back from you again. So, anything with stock issues. So listing on Seller Central, using FBA and FBM as a backup. So when VC runs out of stock. So what I'm talking about there is that, Amazon their algorithm got a little behind. You sold through some of your products a little faster than they expected. They're now out of stock. Well, now you lose sales. You also lose velocity on the ASIN. So if you have Seller Central live as a backup, as soon as Vendor Central, for whatever reason, they run out of stock, that Seller Central will kick in, and that item will not stop selling. You won't lose velocity on it.
And that's actually part of the things we're doing a lot. Like we make sure that we're not selling when vendor is in stock, but the second it's out of stock, that basically the seller account takes over and starts doing the sales, whether that's from FBA or really from the warehouse of the brand itself. It's something we definitely supplement. We got a couple things from the audience. I think Ian shared that they've been getting or be able to get some free Vine credits from the vendor manager. So that's maybe also a thing to take into consideration during the negotiations. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's a very good point. Yeah, definitely consider that during negotiations as well. I forgot to add that one in. Yep.
Yeah, and I think Ian also had a contribution, which is interesting, the direct fulfillment in Vendor Central. That could be a backup inventory. So yeah, that's actually a really good one to also take into consideration. Particularly, it's good if we see it a lot happen with bulkier products that the direct fulfillment is being used, but also indeed like as a backup. The challenge sometimes is that fulfillment and logistics and integration and making sure that all of that is automated. But if the from a profit side, it makes sense, and you can do, or you don't want to do the 3P side, it's definitely good in between.
And there's one more channel to DI, direct import, that going back to Roman's question about challenge listings suppressed due to profitability considerations by Amazon. That's sort of another area too. DI, basically what you can do is, if you have the capability, Amazon can directly import your goods from your manufacturer in China or wherever it happens to be manufactured. And what you do is you don't end up paying in most cases, and you have to negotiate this with them, but in most cases, you're not paying freight and you're not paying duty. They are paying it. And so you can then give them a better price on the goods because you're not paying the duty and freight. And that can give them a little bit more margin. And we've leveraged DI with larger items in particular, like furniture and things like that, to a great extent. And it's fantastic. It works really well. So that's just something that you could also use on the vendor central side with listings that are suppressed. But otherwise, as I mentioned on Seller Central, if there's an item that keeps being suppressed on Vendor Central, hybrid model is great for you. Listed on Seller Central, there's nothing that's going to be suppressed because it's your product you're selling.
Daniel had a question. Any comments on vendor flex?
I'm not familiar with vendor flex, actually. Anyone?
Dan, is this the model where they're actually move into your warehouse and they square off a portion of it, and they're basically in your warehouse shipping your products? So I'm dating myself back just 7 years or so. That's something we're working on on the Perigo side. It's a very interesting program I've seen mixed results, and we can have a follow-up conversation. That's usually where it ends up, is a little bit of mixed results.
Yeah, I think there's some benefits to it, like reducing shortages and chargebacks, which brings us to the next piece as well. But also transportation savings, eliminate some of the freight allowances. So there's a decent bit of advantages there. But yeah, it's a program we're less familiar with. It's interesting. Thanks for the contribution, Daniel.
And I know this is more on the spot and not on the slide here, but we talk, we love AI. I'd love for you to share our AI story, just making sure, leveraging AI, pros and cons. Obviously, we have that use case where you had, I think it was $155,000 ad that was turned off by AI that you turned on.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a great story to share.
Yeah, so I took over a client, and we're doing their advertising for them, managing their advertising. And previously, the agency that was dealing with them was only using AI, and they had, I don't know, like 50,000 ads going at the same time. Special algorithm that was supposed to work, which clearly wasn't, because when I looked at it with human eyes instead of AI, I used GI, Greg Intelligence, instead of artificial intelligence. I look back in time to see, hey, what ads were working at some point that were efficient, that drove good sales. And I found this one, and I thought, oh, well, that looks good. It was doing, I don't know, not a ton. It was doing maybe 10,000 a month or something, but it was at a good ACOS. And so I tweaked it, turned it back on. Lo and behold, that one that they had turned off started generating a couple $100,000 in sales per month. And it's just a shame. It just goes to show you that the AI couldn't recognize, that could have been a good ad. It was already there. All the history was there. So it's so easy to look at and go, oh, okay, let's reactivate that one because it looks like it has potential. And sure enough, it had huge potential. In fact, I don't know, that ad went from in November. Waiting on this. Generated $205,000 in sales, just that one ad, and it was turned off. So yeah, AI is not always
50,000 other ads on that way.
AI is not always the best. I'm sure you guys have also seen, Vendor Central, they're starting to do some AI and saying, oh, here's some proposed changes to your bullet points or description or whatever. You go in there and go, really? That's what you're proposing? And it's like, it's nothing. So yeah, I think we got a little ways to go. I think, Chat GPT and things like that are great tools and everything, but I think that, to be completely generative, I think we've got a little ways to go.
Nice. Yeah, that was a bit of the spiral. That spiral I was talking about, indeed. Like it's is it the myth or is it good? I think it's always a combination, right? You want to see what can AI do and help and automate, but also let's have a human eye to it.
Yeah, I think just to take away from conversations I'm having is the AI piece. We've seen a lot of trimming out of the digital teams and the number of people that are on them.
Mhm.
And there's this need then for tools to backfill. And I totally agree with you, Greg. Like most of the tools that are out there, if it is all AI and you just set it and forget it, it's not a good situation. It does perform and optimize for a little bit, but just it slowly over time, if you're just 2% off from direction, that 2% becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes
Right.
16. It's those tools that are actually having human interaction as well. So like anything else, like a chat GPT that you're going to use it, it's going to get you 80, 85, 90% of the way there, and you need a human to take it the last 10%.
Yeah, you still have to
I'd
tweak
still
it.
encourage you to use those type of tools because they do get rid of that heavy burden of the initial start. But these tools are popping up from creating detail pages to running your paid media to scraping tools. How are you looking at the marketing cloud? There's a lot of great tools that are out there. Just none of them are set it and forget it yet.
And in addition to that scenario, overall, like they were doing their tool, their AI tool on advertising was averaging $173,000 a month in sales at right about a 20% ACOS. We took over, and as an example, instead of the average of 173,000, October it was 515,000 in ad sales at 13% ACOS instead of 20. So, more efficiency and more dollars. And I mean, but it just, to me, it blows me away sometimes when people use these tools the way they do. It's like, what a shame. They missed out on so much by not just looking at it. So, but anyway, I'll
Nice.
get
Maybe
off
it's a
my
good bridge.
soapbox.
Maybe it's a good bridge to some of the tools that we potentially can help with. Bobby, you want to go through this?
Yeah, so my favorite, recovery management. This is a big issue. Maybe go to the next slide with some of those stats already. So yeah, we see on average 1 to 5% of total revenue lost to shortages and different fees. We've built some tools to help automate the submission of the traditional disputes, also open and support cases. We do find support cases tend to have a little higher success rate. As many of you probably have known, you have to dispute 1 or 2 times the traditional way, then open support cases. One of the things we definitely recommend, don't give up after the first couple disputes. We actually did an analysis, a footwear company that we were talking about the AI. They had about 250 disputes we analyzed. First dispute was 50% successful. Second was 75%. The third was 27 for 27. And then we brought in several more $1,000 when we disputed 4 and 5 times. So a lot of times, we'll see clients that will go in there, dispute, give up, stop there, move on to the next one. So definitely continue to dispute, those support cases. It does take a while. That's why I always recommend using tools. But yeah, it is something you don't want to give up after the first few. And typically we see about a 70-75% success rate on average. We've seen as high as 90+%. And Amazon's one thing to keep in mind is sometimes the data is not accurate in Amazon. So if you see in the invoice detail page, for example, you'll have a summary where it'll show the current shortage. There's times that won't match the actual shortage. So the true number is the line items. So you'd have to, download that report, manipulate it in a spreadsheet. But
And basically, you'd have to have one person in your accounting team just working on recovery. Yeah. And so your tool, by the way, I can attest to Bobby's tool and Jordi's tool. It's amazing. It does so well. I mean, because you can't do it as a human. It just can't. That's where, having some sort of AI or a tool is paramount for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it is. I think we see, a lot of clients, either you're spending a ton of time manually doing it. And even then, we see clients that just miss it, right? You have to download 90 days for 5 years back. So we always recommend, at least do audits, whether it's with another vendor, just really to get it visibility on, what those, how big of an issue it is. Because we've seen as high, I saw one client actually had 13% total revenue loss. We had one client recently, $2.5 million in shortages. Another one $1 million. So it is, it's a big issue and it's a challenge to really manage and just keep track of everything.
Yeah,
I think the fun thing is we can.
Oh, go on, Jordi.
Well, we can look back for 5 years, so that's something that we've seen to be quite useful. That it goes back so far that you can actually get back a lot of money from the past, and it's your money. So
your money, yeah, exactly.
You want to talk to some of the other tools before we dive into the key takeaways, and then we have a few minutes for Q&A?
Yeah, I'll just talk quickly about catalog management. So some of the tools, I think one of the biggest issues we hear is catalog, right? Not just discrepancies on your product pages. So there's some good tools out there. We have one of them where we monitor your catalog. So seeing the any discrepancies, whether it's bullet points, descriptions, categories, compared to what you submitted to Vendor Central versus your product page. I think, Greg, you brought up this point earlier on the variations. That I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar have the same issue. That
it's a huge pain
biggest,
point.
yeah.
Sure.
Hurts the ad conversion, hurts the reviews, the bestseller rank.
Yep.
I know Amazon's working on some tools to help with that. I don't know if that's. I'd love your feedback if anybody's seen, or in the audience, if you've seen it successful. I know that a lot of the clients I've talked to are optimistic it's going to help, but they're also, skeptical.
It's Amazon.
Yeah, but the variations obviously a huge issue. I know that's. I think we interviewed probably 20 clients, and I think 19 out of 20 said it was their number one issue. With the one that said it wasn't, they only had a couple variations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then a few things around PO Insights, sales analytics to keep track of everything. Actually, Greg helped develop a lot of that to make sure that all the data insights are in a very granular level.
Yeah,
and then
because it's cause and effect, right? You know why. If the sales went down, there's all the different points of what could have caused that, and then the opposite. Hey, when something good happened, sales went up. Oh, what happened? Oh, we went back in stock and we were advertising. So it's a great tool to be able to analyze all that.
Sure. Nice. And on the 3P side, the profitability pieces in our platform are a lot around pricing and pricing calculations, promotions, as well as virtual bundling, where we can particularly lower price products, bundle multi-packs or different items together, as well as a powerful repricing tool that works for Amazon and a few other channels too. If you have competitors on the buy box, you could compete against them. So there's some of the tools in the channels tech stack, and we are happy to talk more in depth about them. And I want to dive into the key takeaways. So as a wrap up, I think profitability is typically the main decision factor in what seller model, the SVS, the advertising. What's your decision? So make sure you have that data and you analyze it. Use your negotiations to launch new products, right? I liked what Ian said, get the Vine free Vine credits or something like that to in return during those negotiations. Be aware of a volatile market, both 1P and 3P. A lot of things are changing, so there's a need for flexibility. Actually, the Challenge Core platform is a fully integrated end-to-end solution for all the 3P marketplaces, and we often keep changing with those channels. So if that's something you would be interested in, let us know. And also be aware of other marketplaces, right? So even Walmart is actually reporting more growth than Amazon quarter over quarter. And I got a call with Shein this morning. It's maybe an interesting one, but they showed their growth rates were a lot more even than either Amazon or Walmart. So there's a lot of happening in that market as well. I wanted to end. Is there any questions from the audience before we dive into a potential freebie for you all?
Yeah, I don't see any other ones dropping in. Yeah, so we've got just a couple minutes left. We'll wrap up within, I guess, probably the next 2 minutes. Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. Yeah, so then this is whilst people can put their question in, here's a QR. What we do currently for the coming 3 weeks or for the rest of the year, we're giving away free audits. So we can analyze for the recovery management specifically. You add basically an email address, and we're going to analyze how much money we think we can get you back. So it's free, and you don't have to pay anything until we start doing some of the recovery management. So scan if you're interested, or reach out to myself or Bobby, and we'll get you set up, because it's just also fun to see, hey, my finance team is doing this well. Can I do a check? And this usually analyzes that. So at the same time, I think we got a question in from Ian.
Yep.
Secure incremental marketing spend. How is this different than a vendor providing increased ad and promo spending, is it coming on Amazon side?
So I can answer that. It's not coming from Amazon side, it's still coming from your side. Whether it be the 1%, 2%, whatever you agree to. The point is that what you're doing is you're putting that 1 or 2%, whatever it is, against marketing for sure. And what there's actually a separate department there that will do special marketing events. There'll be events around certain holidays, around certain catalogs and things like that you will then be participating in, and that 2% will go against that fund. And it's very different than agreeing to more ad spend. And by the way, though, that's another thing to mention too in your negotiations. If you can get your vendor manager to be on board instead of adding a percentage to your co-op or something like that, if you agree to more ad spend, that's a total win for you, because doing the ad spend with the right efficiency is just going to grow your business. So a lot of times they will not agree to that because it doesn't actually affect their net PPM. It all comes down to net PPM. But we've had certain circumstances where, after fighting with them for long enough, they'll go, fine, just agree to more ad spend and we'll be done with this, And so if you can get away with that, absolutely fantastic. But yeah, the incremental marketing spend, though, is a separate sort of fund, and there's even a separate group that it's not even your vendor manager managing that. There's a marketing group that will manage that. Did we just drop off? Oh, that was just the screen share. That's what that is.
Awesome. Well, Greg, Bobby, Jordi, thanks so much for your time today. Everybody, thanks for the great participation, the questions that came in. This is going to be a fun follow-up. More than happy to connect you with everybody on the call here. Look for a follow-up email from me. I'd love to grab 30 minutes of your time as well. Just kind of network and knowledge share what I see going across the digital landscape. If you are in the New York area, next Thursday, the 12th, we are doing a full day event in Midtown. We'd love to see you there. Just ping somebody on our team. And with that, we're going to wrap up this webinar. Again, thanks to the team here at Channel Engine at AMZ PhD. You guys are fantastic, and encourage everybody to have a follow-up conversation. Thanks everybody.
Aaron.
Thanks for the
so
questions,
much.
everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great one.